Welcome to It's All Recruiting, the show that looks at everything through the lens of recruiting. I'm your host, Jim Stroud. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, time for another action-packed episode of the It's All Recruiting podcast. I'm your host with the most, Jim Stroud. Yay! I know it has been a long while since I've done a podcast, but I just could not walk away. Could not put it down, especially when I have such an intriguing guest to discuss these interesting topics which you're about to learn about. Actually, before I go into all that, special guest, if you would, introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do.
It's Peter Gudmundsson. I am the founder and CEO of Hire Maturity.
Okay. What exactly is Hire Maturity? Tell me a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, so Hire Maturity is a new company dedicated to the mission of helping employers connect with and hire older workers. So really, we draw the line somewhat arbitrarily at 45. So mature talent, experienced talent, there are all sorts of euphemisms, but at the end of the day, it's just older workers that we put in touch with employers.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I had several questions about that demographic because, as you know, the field that I work in HR, this is a topic that comes up from time to time, especially when I'm speaking to job seekers in general as well. I come across several mature workers who are having challenges finding work for a variety of reasons. And I hear from their side, I hear from the employer side. I just want to get your perspective on things. What would you say are some of the top reasons why mature workers are having a difficulty finding opportunities?
Yeah, people usually jump right to age discrimination, and it's true. It's real. There's no question that ageism or age discrimination is an absolute real problem. And, of course, it's a problem for older job seekers. It's really a problem for ignorant companies. That's the problem. It's holding them back. And our whole contention is that many companies will remain ignorant, and there's nothing we can do about it. But there are quite a few others that will see the light, so to speak, and realize that systematically or unsystematically cutting themselves off from almost half of the workforce makes absolutely no sense. That if anything, adopting what we call a mature talent acquisition program just makes good business sense. And the failure to do that is it's certainly stupid, and it might just be ignorant or bigoted.
Okay. Tell us how you really feel. All right.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm passionate about this subject. I don't hold back at all because I really do see it time and time again. It's interesting. I mean, it's literally, there's actually third-party research that I found that shows this, that about half of the companies in America don't want to actively hire older workers. Now, they don't want to trip up discrimination employment law, but they don't want to actively seek. The other half actually say that given the opportunity, they would actively seek older workers. And what typically happens in that half is you engage them in conversation and say, well, what do you think about older workers? And generally it comes down to, first of all, what's the definition of older? Because older is typically your age plus 2 or 5 years. And so they always think that older people are older and younger people are younger than them. It's a self-centered view. But what happens is you start engaging them on, well, who are some of your more productive employees? We're like, well, old Madge in the back there, she's been here 30 years. She's awesome. Or Bob, we hired him just last year. He was like 63, I think, and he's been the most productive guy on the floor or in the store or at headquarters. And it's amazing how you hear that story, and the light bulb starts to go off. Well, then why do you spend many of your resources chasing millennials and going to conferences with titles like how do we get the millennials to show up and work and all that sort of stuff when, in fact, the answer is right in front of you all this time? That if you just opened your mind a little bit, you'd find incredibly effective talent that's been right in front of you all along.
Well, very good point. So let me ask you this to play the devil's advocate here. All right, so let's say that I'm looking for X, and X is paying $85,000, right? Mm-hmm. And so I come across some resumes of some mature workers who could certainly do the job, but my estimate of their salary they probably will come in at 120 or higher, just based on all the experience they have. So my thinking is that, okay, this person has experience I need, but I know I can't afford them or her because they've been in the field for so long. I know I can't afford them, so I'm not even going to try. What would you say to that?
Right. Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, if you don't shoot, you don't score. I mean, so you should try. And maybe, well, first of all, maybe they're worth 120. Maybe they are that much better. But yes, understanding salary bands, what they are, if you truly are restricted and you cannot articulate for yourself or your organization that they are worth the higher amount, maybe they would take the 85. Maybe they're at a different point in their career where they would do that. Or maybe there's something more creative. Maybe they'll work 4 days a week for 85. And you get more out of them in 4 days than you would get in 5 or 10 days out of somebody else. So every case is individual, and any sort of group generalization is always a little bit dangerous. I mean, it's the irony of the diversity business in general is that people are supposed to not make generalizations, but of course that's the first thing they do is make generalizations. But what we're encouraging is an open mind. We're not saying hire everybody over a certain age. We're saying don't close your mind to it. In fact, open your mind to the potential of these older workers, and that a mature talent acquisition program should be an element. It should be one, bullet in the magazine, so to speak, or tool in the kit. It doesn't replace everything else. But for example, why do some companies go to 20 different college campuses and ignore older workers? Why not go to 19 college campuses and have a mature talent acquisition program to make sure you're getting a mix? That's what we're talking about.
Tell me more about this mature acquisition program, because one thing I can hear a company say in the back of my mind, because I talk to them from time to time, is that they'll say, okay, I like the idea of hiring mature workers, but I'm wondering how long the retention rate will be. Will they say, okay, I've been here, I've done this, I'm not really feeling satisfied with the work, so I'm going to leave?
Well, we love that. That's a great objection to overcome because there are multiple studies from a lot of different research firms on how older workers are retained at a much higher rate. Turnover for millennials and Generation Z folks, or whatever we're calling them today, is much, much higher. And so once you hit the 40s or 50s, you get much more longevity out of a given employee. So the statistics are in our favor in that category. Now, again, it's like many political debates. Depending which side you're on, you'll find certain statistics to back you or not. And ultimately, a lot of people say, I don't care what the statistics say. I feel a certain way, and I'm sticking with it. And again, that's why we come back to this binary distinction between those who are open-minded and those who aren't. But yeah, in terms of longevity, it's much better. In terms of cognitive ability, it is true that starting in our 20s, shockingly enough, we all tend to have some cognitive decline. I mean, we would not do as well on an ACT or an SAT test today as we might have done 20 or 30 years ago. But we also other parts of our brain get stronger as we build experience bases and recognize patterns in life and in the workplace, and that's called wisdom. And wisdom usually wins out over raw intelligence any day.
How do you answer mature workers who say that they want to get back into the swing of things, but they don't know how to handle working for someone who could be their child? 30 years younger than them.
Yes. I just this morning read a study from about 6 months ago, I think it was by Gallup, that said that 85% of baby boomers, and that's people these days who are, I think, 52 and above, said they would not have a problem working for someone younger than them. 85%. So a lot of them realize it's just the nature of the beast as they get into their career that happens. Some people are in a managerial track. Some people are on a sales or manufacturing or whatever else they do. And so, yeah, it's not a bunch. But now the other question, and I don't remember the statistic, but I read in that same study, they were saying, what about younger people? How do they feel about managing people who are older? And it was also, don't quote me on this, it was something like 70 or 75% didn't have a problem with managing people who are older than them. And so, anyway, so it's really, I don't think as much of a problem as some people make it out to be.
Sure. I'm thinking about a movie that was out, I think a couple of years back with Robert De Niro, where he returned to work.
Oh, exactly. And Anne Hathaway, the Intern. Everybody talks about that. It's amazing how soon that for a movie that I didn't think was watched by that many people, it was watched by a lot of people because as soon as we start talking about this subject, people bring up the Intern. And you remember in that movie, Anne Hathaway was a very capable young lady, but she didn't have experience and wisdom. And Robert De Niro's character was sort of an old school guy that actually had a lot to share, and he may not have been doing the web or programming behind that company's website, but he brought a lot of value in that perspective, and I think most organizations can benefit from that sort of wisdom.
Yeah, I think that's actually playing out right now in a lot of companies around the world. It's actually too. As another check in the pro column, I've noticed that on a global scale, actually, how a lot of the baby boomers are retiring and how that is creating what's called a brain drain for a lot of organizations. And some organizations, what they have to do is recruit back the people they laid off because they need that knowledge back again. Are you seeing some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't cite actual examples as much as people talking about it, but that's another irony. You do hear human capital people talking out of both sides of their mouth. On the one hand, it is, can you believe it? We're losing all this great talent because they're resigning and so on. We shouldn't do that. The other half, however, are saying, well, how can we get these people back? So again, so which is it? And so, yeah, it's a funny irony.
Yeah, I've noticed also some companies are instituting a mentoring program where they're teaming up younger executives with some of the older executives so that they can transfer some of that knowledge back and forth.
Absolutely, yeah, and which also goes both ways too. Because really, I mean, I'm advocating for older workers. That's what we do, and that's what we believe in. But we're not at war with younger ones. In fact, it's a multi-generational workforce that's really the ideal. And I mean, even sociologists have had studies for a while that even in societies, and of course a company is a form of society, the most healthy societies are those where the young and the old intermix freely. They're not segregated by age group. And it's the same way with the company. The more interplay, the more diversity of thought that we get. Yeah.
Let me ask you this too. This comes up quite a bit as well, and I'll tell you the advice that I tend to give when this comes up. When I speak to job seekers about how to find work, one real concern they have is that their skills are out of date, and they are having difficulty finding another job doing what they've been doing for the past 10, 15 years. What advice would you give them? And then I'll tell you what I typically say.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, there's two aspects to that. There's the appearance of skills being out of date, and there's the actual fact of skills being out of date. And very often it's the appearance that's the issue. So, and the answer to that is to learn the current terms. Make sure you're current, because you know how trendy American business is typically. People very often they'll talk about the latest, even in technology, it's the latest, whether it's cloud computing or whatever, and it's like someone who's been around for a while says, "Oh yeah, we were working on that in the late '50s." There are no the expression is there are no new ideas. They just keep coming around again, recycling over and over again. So perceptions are important, but then on the reality side, it is up to the individual to keep up to date. So if you are a COBOL programmer, the odds are there are fewer and fewer projects to do that. But if if you're a good programmer and you know COBOL, you can learn .NET or Ruby or whatever is in demand today. So good programmers are good programmers. It's up to them to keep up on the latest languages.
Yep, I basically say things along those lines. And because one thing that comes up when I say that, I say stay up to date, and they'll say, well, I can't afford to go back to school, or don't know if I have the mentality to go back to a 4-year degree or something like that. I would say, well, don't, because you can get so much more with so much little so much less these days. And I cite examples of Udacity, which has this nano degree program where they teach these courses for, I think, $200 or not that much. But you can learn how to do one particular skill. And then once you learn this one particular skill, the company or companies that are sponsoring that class, they're right there ready to talk to you about an opportunity because you just become certified in something that they need right now in their organization. So pursuing a nano degree is something I suggest. And then I also say that they can go to different conferences and pick up on what's being said there. And they may say, well, I can't afford to go to different conferences. I said, well, okay, well, you can go to YouTube because a lot of the conferences that are out there, they have videos of their speakers. So you can go to YouTube and do a search on whatever you're into, let's say technology, and then you will see, type in technology in 2018 or 2017, and you'll see videos of people at different conferences talking about the latest tech trends. And then also there's another site called SlideShare, which is owned by LinkedIn.
Of course,
where people upload different slide decks from different conferences. So there's a way to get information on the cheap and still be very current in whatever else you're doing. And then I also suggest to people that they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So I would say, well, that may be true, but you can teach a dog to do the same tricks somewhere else. So let's say that in my particular example, I'm in HR recruiting. I do a lot of sourcing, which means I search the internet for people for jobs. And so that same research capability could be transferred to being a librarian, for example, or into maybe a sales organization looking for leads. So I try to challenge people to think about the skills you have right now and how they can be applied in a different industry.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree entirely. Absolutely. You're preaching to the choir on me. Yep.
So what do you think about the companies who may think that, and I don't know this per se because this is not in the wheelhouse that I operate in, benefits and so forth. What would you say to a company that say, you know what, I want to hire mature workers, but I think that they will be more expensive in terms of the health benefits that I offer out to the other employees? Is that just bad thinking, or is that true? I mean, how does that work?
No,
do you know?
I'm not an actuary. I don't know the details on that. It's probably true to some extent, but remember that it's certainly not true across the board. Many have working spouses, so they're already covered somewhere else. Others, when they hit 65, are going to be covered by Medicare, so that's actually a savings. So on average, if you really do have an aggressive mature talent acquisition program, you're probably going to have I don't know for a fact, but I would speculate you might even have net savings. But and then finally, that in most companies, it's not going to have that material an impact. If you've got hundreds or thousands of employees, a handful of people who are on the older end are not going to throw your group off that much. I don't think. Okay. And even I would argue that, let's say someone costs all in, an extra 5% because of health expenses or premiums. The person has to be at least more than 5% better than that. So you're getting more value. It's important not for employers not to confuse value with price or with cost. So true. And I think also when you mention not confusing value with cost, I think a lot of mature workers, I think they underestimate what they have. Certainly some of the ones that I've been in touch with recently. And I suggest to them, I say, well, you have a wealth of knowledge. Why not start your own company? Team up with 2 or 3 other people if you don't feel like you can incur everything yourself. Then put that knowledge to work and then hire, other people to do the heavy lifting, and you just point in the right direction kind of a deal. Is that something that comes up in your conversations as well? Absolutely. No question. Cool. Wow, I feel like I've learned so much in this short period of time. That's what I said. That's the exciting thing about this topic is that people don't give it some thought, and when they do think it through a little bit, the light bulb goes off. Like, wow, I've been acting out of habit. more so than thinking clearly. And that's what we're really, at the core of what we're trying to get people to do is to get people to think. I believe across just about every diversity category you can imagine, there's a little bit of a, wait, did you really mean that, what you just said? Think about what you just said. And someone, when they do, 9 times out of 10 or 4 out of 5 times, they're going to say, oh, no, I didn't mean to come across as that. Now that I think about it, yeah, that was an ignorant statement. I apologize. What I really mean is something quite different. And that's what I find in many ways, age is sort of the last frontier of diversity. People say things, which of course indicates what they're thinking, that are shocking when it comes to older people that for any other category would be, press-worthy, cringe-worthy stuff. I mean, I had, for example, a friend, actually, a chief diversity officer of a very large company. I won't say the name. And I was telling her about Hire Maturity, and I said, do you have any interest? And she said, well, we have a lot of technology projects coming in the next year. I'm not sure we really want to hire a bunch of older people. This is from the head of diversity. And I said, oh, so you probably won't be hiring women either. And she paused, and she said, what do you mean? Thinking that I had said something shocking. I said, well, I read that Google memo, the guy at Google, and evidently women aren't good at technology. And she said, well, we would never say that. I said, well, you just said the same thing about older people. And she said, ooh, you got me. I mean, she realized how ignorant she was or came across when I put it in terms of gender, which she could understand. And it's the same way. I mean, we have to judge people as, not to be too Rodney King, can't we all get along? It is a little bit of a, shouldn't we think before we speak and understand our biases? That's what diversity is supposed to be all about. And I'm afraid even some of our leaders of the diversity function don't get it sometimes, or at least when it comes to age, they don't get it.
Wow. I'm going to send you this research that I have on my desk here. It's from an Oxford University study. They did a study based on data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it rated about 35 skills on how important they are to employers across 600 different jobs. And across those jobs, the most sought-after skill set were, these are like the top 6 or 7, I think it is, judgment and decision-making, critical thinking, active listening, spoken communication, social perceptiveness, persuasion, and negotiation. And it may be my faulty thinking, but I tend to think about more mature people having these type of skill sets than a lot of the millennials that I happen to come across.
Precisely.
So that could be another strong check in the pro column for why you should hire mature workers, because they tend to have these skill sets ingrained in them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Wow. Where has the time gone by? I appreciate you hanging out with me here in the podcast. If somebody wanted more information
I've enjoyed it so much. I'd love to come back.
Oh, please. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you in particular or wanted to learn more about Hire Maturity and the things you're doing over there, how can they connect with you? Yeah,
well, our website is hire, HIRE, -maturity.com. So hire-maturity.com. My email is peter@hire-maturity.com. So peter@hire-maturity.com is the best place to find me.
Sweet. Well, thank you, sir, for being on the It's All Recruiting podcast.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you were not there, then I would be here talking to myself. So thank you for that. If you would, check out the links in the podcast description because they are there for you. Finally, if you love what you heard, hate what you heard, or not quite sure what you just heard, I want to know about it. Connect with me on Twitter @JimStroud or LinkedIn or Google+, or pretty much anywhere you find me online. I'm everywhere. Okay, enough of that. Until next time, one last word spoken 3 times to my people at Randstad Source Right. Love, love, love.